Live from the Export Beer Garden studios, you're listening to the BYC, where we wait with bated breath on the eve of the highly anticipated first test against the English. In truth, it seems bizarre even contemplating such a thing as the country suffers through the pounding dished out by Cyclone Gabrielle. And we here at the BYC send out our best wishes to those adversely affected. But let's momentarily distract ourselves with the great game, because as always, there's plenty to discuss. And Dylan Cleaver, as we anticipate the start of the Test series tomorrow against the English, there's plenty going on. Chaos in the cricketing world too. And we talked in the last podcast about, potential areas of weakness for the Black Caps, one of which was the bowling attack. Things have slid downhill since then, mate.
Yeah. A potential weakness has become a rather obvious weakness with Kyle Jamison's back going again, which is really, really sad news.
Yeah, it is sad news.
It reminds me a little bit of Shane Bond, actually, who, it sounds a bit callous to put it like this, but actually had to break his back a couple of times before it finally fixed itself for good.
Yes.
So, hopefully we'll see him back in action when he's fit and ready to go this time. And, and then Matt Henry mistimed a bit of procreation.
Yes. Stuck
in Christchurch. And that has necessitated, given that they're not going to pick Trent Boult, and I know you've got some strong thoughts about that.
Oh, very strong thoughts about that.
They're not going to pick Trent Boult, so they've brought in Jacob Duffy, who got carted by England in that warm-up match in Hamilton, and Scott Kugelheim, who has a sum total of 8 first-class wickets over the last 2 seasons, averaging well over 50. So we're starting to get to the, I don't want to say bottom of the barrel because that's offensive to good cricketers, but we're starting to get a little bit down the depth chart.
Enough, say I, Paul Ford. Enough. I would say and argue vehemently, pull the trigger on Bolty. He's right there. We need the man. Let's not be all, PC and, we've got to give other guys an opportunity. Bugger that, Paul Ford. Bring in Bolty and let's just be done with it.
Preach, Hoyte, preach. I totally agree, and it's really frustrating. Yeah, it's bring back Boult all day from my point of view, and I would have had him in there from the get-go. If he's in New Zealand, if he's available, pick the 11 guys that are available. In my mind, it's sort of akin to having a young whippersnapper that's come up through the ranks, done surprisingly well in domestic cricket or something, and we've gone, shit, we've got to get him in there. He's not contracted. Who cares? We're trying to win test matches. And it's compounded by the madness that's ensued with, Doug Bracewell, I think, stuck in floods. We've got Matt Henry on baby duty. We've got, Jamison's injured. We're desperate. And I just think we're going to look back on this moment and go, God, that was stupid when we did that. I wonder in a few years we'll go, God, we missed a boat. We should have actually changed our policy back in the middle of February 2023.
Well, the
Boult is super keen to play.
Yes.
And, all that's happening really is New Zealand cricket is being stuck in the mud here and being old school, and they've got to look to the future. This is where cricket's going. Get with the program.
Yeah, well, and I put it to you, Dylan Cleaver, actually, that it's exceptional circumstances here. It's not like there's a lot of chaos going on, and it's completely acceptable as far as I'm concerned that you get Bolty in there. If you're not going to go Bolty, I'm not happy with the choices that they've made in terms of Kugelheim and Duffy. As I was saying to you before the podcast, man, I'd go outside the box then if you're going to do that and get the big left armer Lister in the game.
You're a fetish player, yeah.
I rate him. He's a good, difficult bowler.
I really don't understand why they haven't gone Doug Bracewell, who we know can play Test cricket.
Yes.
He's done it very effectively in the past.
He's second on the Plunkett Shield charts,
Precisely.
Second only to Matt Henry with 22 wickets.
Yeah.
Or whatever it is.
Do they even
20
care
wickets. He's
about,
third behind Duffy.
Do they care about Plunkett Shield? I mean, obviously they don't if they're going to pick Kugelheim, who's done nothing in the Plunkett Shield for 2 years. I understand they like his pace, but, is Joe Root going to be really Ben Stokes? Ollie Pope going to be really bothered about whether the guy's coming in at 147 or 143? I'm not sure they are. I'm relaxed about the Trent Boult thing in that I agree that exceptional circumstances were possibly a reason to bring him back. I wouldn't be changing policy, though. I think they have to stick this out with the policy. You want your players to want to play in New Zealand and want to be available all the time. So I think they've got to make a stand there. But in this particular instance, I think there are enough exceptional circumstances around to go, you know what, we've got to pick him.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest with you, Dylan, if we were on the same selection panel, mate, there'd be fisticuffs at the moment. But, I mean, actually, you made the point, and it's an interesting point, Lockie Ferguson. If we want pace, well, there you go. The concern is that he'd last 5 overs and blow out Paul Ford.
Yeah, that, and, he's not actually playing first-class cricket, so he's playing literally no red ball cricket. So that would be a little bit avant-garde, but again, if you're picking a guy that's only played a handful of games or only taking a handful of wickets, it's just a different type of avant-garde, really, let's be honest. I think, the contenders, if you want raw pace, are Ferguson, Kugeline's up there. Milne, is he injured at the moment? I never quite know.
No, but he's not contracted.
Ben Sears, I guess, and then Ben Sears is the other guy. So, I think it's a dilemma, and you'd think that you just pick your best 11 guys that you can get on the park, and I'm just not sure that we've landed there, and it frustrates the hell out of me.
It feels to me, you mentioned Sears there, a young fella with some very raw pace. If you're not going to take the obvious, which is to say, okay, exceptional circumstances, let's bring Bolty back in, then I feel like the decision that they're making is a really compromised decision. And if you're going to not go with Bolt, I reckon you go outside the box and you don't go with what they've gone with, Dylan. Do you know what I'm saying?
I do.
You go outside the box, you give a young guy, a whippersnapper with raw pace, a chance. And Kugeline and Duffy, really?
Yeah, I know what you mean. You're saying that, okay, it's not our best attack.
Yes.
So if you can't pick our best attack, at least pick an interesting or an exciting or an attack with an eye to the future.
Yes.
Whereas they've really gone very middle of the road.
That's exactly what I was meaning. Exactly what I was meaning. And I have to say, if I'm being perfectly honest with hand on heart, read this series, I felt we were underdogs already, and Paul Ford, I mean, I don't want to be a pessimist, but geez, I'm not feeling overly excited at our prospects at the moment.
Well, it's going to be exciting, and it's going to be quite good to watch, and it's going to happen quickly, I'd suggest, for a variety of reasons. Look, it is a scary prospect, because I think I really didn't. I had not clocked that Matt Henry was not going to be available for this Test match, and I had probably put all of my optimistic eggs in that basket, because I think he's a critical partnership, I guess, with Southey to really mow through that. If we're going to mow through that English top order, then those are the two guys to do it. And look, I am nervous about where those wickets are going to come from under this current scenario.
You know what? The reason I'm not totally pessimistic is because of the circumstances around the first test, which have been disrupted. We have no idea. I know apparently Bay Oval has got advanced drainage and it's superb, but we've got no idea about how much surface is water is just under that surface.
Yeah. Well, it took them about, from my understanding, Dylan, today, it took them about 4 or 5 hours to get the skiers and so forth out of there, But, what is the state of it?
Well,
it is a great draining ground.
It is a great draining ground, but there's moisture around. You've got the added lottery of the pink ball. You've got the added lottery of playing with a pink ball under lights at Bay Oval. I mean, jeepers, we saw how hard it was in that Tradies 11 final when we were watching on about how some of them struggled under lights at Bay Oval. So depending on where you get to bat and what state the ball's in, it could actually be a bit of a lottery. And Ollie Robinson pointed to that. He said that he still felt that pink ball day-night cricket was still a lottery, a bit of a gimmick, and I tend to agree with him. So I still think there's a bit of a coin toss element to the first test. Yeah,
and I see what you're saying in the sense that if things go our way and we get all the advantages of the pink ball scenario pulled forward, it may even the game out. But still, my gut feeling is we're going to be overwhelmed by a very confident English side.
Yeah, hopefully. I mean, they are at the other end of the spectrum. Traditionally there might have been massive amounts of media spotlight zeroing in on them. And yeah, there's been a bit of coverage here and there, but jeepers, there's been more important things for New Zealand to worry about than the English cricket team coming to town. And so, yeah, it feels like it's a beautiful script if you're an English cricket fan. And I hate saying that.
Yeah. Well, the one thing we can say also is when our backs are against the wall, it brings the best out of us, Dylan Cleaver. I mean, what is your expectation for this first test starting tomorrow at the Bay?
Well, I actually disagree with you there about backs to the wall bringing out the best of us. I don't think it does. And my prediction for the series is... I hate to say it, but I think
you're going to, though, aren't you?
Yeah.
You're not going to say it, are you?
You're not going to say it, are you, Dylan? Not on the BYC,
you wouldn't
mate.
say it.
I'm going to say...
I mean, you've already got a reputation as a bit of a pessimist, and you put the dagger in and stuff. But I mean,
you'd
feel
fox
free.
around it, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I mean,
1-0 New Zealand.
Oh, now you're just lying. What are your expectations, Paul Ford?
My expectations is that New Zealand win 2-0 and surprise us all. But if I was betting my life on things, I would say rain-affected first test, England nearly win, and then they clobber us in the second. So 1.7-0.
I think that Kane Williamson gets his first triple at the Basin. There you go.
There you go. Okay, straight from the mouth of Dylan Cleaver there. Well, don't forget that test match, of course, starts tomorrow night, and it's going to be commentated by the ACC commentary team. So that's something very much to look forward to. In other news,
I just saw something come through, boys. Blair Tickner guaranteed to be making his test debut for New Zealand. It's just come through. So that is interesting. He'll be on debut. So whatever your bowling attack looked like, put Blair Tickner in there and lock it in pen alongside Tim Southee.
So let's before we move on. So this bowling attack is definitely, barring catastrophe tonight, it is Tim Southee will take the new ball with Tickner at the other end.
Yes.
With Wagner a first change.
Yes.
Beastie bowling, fiddly little part-time offies. So that's either you're going to be playing Ish as a second spinner, which I think is probably unlikely.
Well, it's going to be green and wet, isn't it?
So is a Wagner...
Ish Sodhi is not in the 12 either. Okay,
there you go.
Just named.
Radio, so it's going to be four seamers and Bracewell bowling fiddly little offies. And Daryl Mitchell may be rolling his arm over. It's not a great test attack, but...
What do you mean four seamers? Who's your fourth?
Well, it's going to be either Kugelheim or Duffy.
Oh, right. I see what you're saying. Yeah.
And the way, just the noises, it sounds like they want a bit of raw pace. Or maybe Tickner's that raw pace. What does he get up to? 145?
Yeah, at his very top end, he's usually 140-ish. Nippy enough.
Can you get 20 English wickets with that? Ooh.
Isn't it the lack of straightness with Tickner rather than the pace that we're worried about?
Yeah, there's a few issues. But, as always, of course, when the boys play, we'll be right behind them, hoping for the very best. Now, let's talk about the White Ferns. And what a debacle.
Oh, my God.
Two absolute poundings at the T20 World Cup there. Sophie Devine, the skipper, coming out and saying, frankly, pretty emotional skipper as well, not good enough.
Embarrassing, she said.
Embarrassing. And I think that's the only way you can describe it, Dylan. Embarrassing.
We've gone from pessimism to outright humiliation here now, haven't we? So this is a really cheerful BYC for all those people out there suffering, cleaning up their properties at the moment, removing dead trees and, replacing tiles on their roof. So I'm really sorry about this, but they were awful. And I'm not totally surprised. Paul mentioned it very presciently last week, actually, that they've been set up by the draw a little bit, getting the host in the second game in Australia in the first game. Even still, they should do far better than that against Australia, and they should be looking to beat South Africa, not be absolutely rogered by them. Batting awful, bowling marginally better, fielding pretty dire, just a really grim landscape. And I kind of saw it coming because I've watched enough of that Women's Super Smash to know that women's cricket in New Zealand is not in great shape at the moment.
Yeah, and the skipper also saying, Paul Ford, not up to international quality, quite frankly. And this is the second time in a row now not reaching the semi-finals.
But they still can.
Oh, they still can. Yeah, I suppose they can technically. But I know you're a big follower of the women's game, Paul, and you'd have been disappointed with the performances thus far.
Yes, incredibly disappointed. I mean, it's one thing to lose. It's another thing not to, make 75 or whatever we haven't managed these first two games. And yeah, it's a difficult draw, but also, we could have pulled off a surprise. And on the one hand, absolutely brilliant that Sophie Devine actually came out and said what she thought. And God loves a sports person that says what they think, and you could see the raw emotion and just the frankness of her comments were great to see. I mean, as disappointing as they were. Look, I think it is mathematically possible, but I saw her say that New Zealand had to score about 8,000 and restrict Sri Lanka and Bangladesh to about 20 in order to progress on run rate because we've been spanked so heavily. So, look, I think it's going to be difficult. And, the other thing that she said, and I guess this is the real issue, she said, I don't think it was a matter of skill. It's like we froze and it was all about the top 2 inches and we weren't thinking straight when we went out there. Now, that is a real worry because, if you're literally kind of so tangled up in your thoughts that you can't play your pull shots and you're missing straight deliveries, then that is a real that runs deep, right? That's tricky.
Yeah, well, I mean, I would take up your point in terms of Sophie Devine coming out and being very blunt in her assessment of the situation. Frankly, from my point of view, I don't think she had a choice. Because the performances were so poor that there's no ducking and hiding in that scenario. You've got to put your hand up and say, frankly, we were shithouse.
Yeah. Yep.
And that's just the be-all and end-all. And our expectations of this side are much more than that. But as you say, Dylan, does it perhaps reflect that the women's game in New Zealand at the moment is struggling a little bit?
Yeah, and I wrote about this briefly in The Bounce yesterday, in that watching the Super Smash, I was a little bit disheartened by the amount of overs that are still being given to not so much spin bowling. I've got no problem with the spin bowling, but super slow, extreme pace-off spin bowling, almost to the point where you call them donkey drops.
Yes.
And not only were there a lot of overs given to that type of bowling, but they weren't being punished. Like, they were being paddled into the outfield for ones and twos. When you're playing against teams now that have full-time athletes, like the Australians, like the English, and you'll see more and more with the Indians, these women are now training 24/7. That's what they do, 365 days a year. They are full-time cricketers. They are in gyms doing weight programs. That sort of bowling just goes. It doesn't stay in the park. Our cricketers have got to get stronger and faster and braver.
They need Hoyte J to come in there, Paul Ford, and talk to them and get the top 2 inches sorted out and talk to them about positive attacking cricket, of which obviously I'm pretty handy at. And but yeah, I think Dylan makes a really good point. It's ponderous, some of the play that's been in the competition domestically in New Zealand.
Happy for you to talk to them about some of those things you mentioned, just maybe not running between the wickets.
Well, that's a Cleaver thing.
Yeah, look, the other thing that you might want to do is go up to the New Zealand cricket boardroom and say that there's, as Dylan has mentioned there's some structural issues coming down the way at us too, right? Because, we're not really in control of the international program. Surprise, surprise. In fact, the fact that the women's IPL auction happened in the middle of an ICC tournament is a good indication of a power play going on there. And as Dylan says, we're not just up against other talented cricketers. We're up against professional athletes that are in increasingly big, scary, well-resourced leagues. The Women's Big Bash, the Women's Premier League, the 100. I mean, all of these tournaments are going to make those countries where those tournaments are hosted stronger, and we're kind of nowhere near that. So we've got to do something quite amazing in terms of getting lots of our players over and into those sorts of systems, and that's easier said than done when you get bowled out for 65 on the international stage.
Waiting.
Yeah, and to compound the bleak news, I think it was 19 New Zealanders up for auction at the WPL. 2 made it.
Yes.
Sophie Devine.
And she just got
She got her base price.
Yeah.
Which so I think it's Royal Challengers Bangalore got an absolute steal there.
Yeah.
I mean, she's not particularly fit at the moment. She's been out injured, but she's still a dynamic player. So I think they got a steal there. And Amelia Kerr was fortunate to have a couple of teams bidding for her. So she went for, I think it works out to be about 190,000.
Oh, I thought it was more in the 110 range, but you could be right.
And but like good players, like stalwarts like Leah Tahuhu, Susie Bates, Maddie Green, Jess Kerr, all passed over.
Yeah. Wow. I guess if you're not performing, that's what happens, fellas.
Yep. And look, I think that those teams, those squads are still settling themselves down. That's the inaugural auction, and then teams will pad out their squads with additional players. But yeah, you're right. Up in lights, you've got Smriti Mandana going for 653,000 and Ash Gardner going for 610,000. This is starting to get into the sort of whoa, holy moly kind of end of the scale. I did want to just someone that we mentioned the other day, Dane van Niekerk, did get picked up in the IPL. So this is the South African former captain who failed her fitness test, deemed too unfit to be picked for South Africa. She is going to the women's IPL. So it just it's a crazy world up there in women's cricket at the moment. It's a money extravaganza if you're in that absolute top echelon of wanted players.
Yes, indeed. Well, moving on, we mentioned the Super Smash, and the finals were played. Northern Districts taking out the men's, and Canterbury taking out the women's game, and that was a bit of a debacle, as we were discussing before the podcast, Dylan Cleaver, given that Wellington's players had all disappeared, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, Canterbury were missing Leah Tahuhu. That was about it. Wellington were desperately short-handed in terms of their White Ferns. Look, just to continue the theme, it wasn't a great game of cricket, to be honest. Blaze probably should have done better in trying to chase it down, but didn't get close. The men's final was good. The right team won. So,
yeah, your thoughts, Paul Ford?
Yeah, I found it hard to get into it. I went to a bunch of the games sort of on the way through.
We're full of joy de vivre today, aren't we?
I did struggle. I did watch a bit of the men's final, and it was good to see Tim Seifert smashing the ball around, and I thought Mitchell Santner looked pretty good. Neil Waggers was looking pretty pumped up, so I am looking forward to seeing him at Mount Maunganui. But look, it did feel a little bit flat. One lovely touch was Amy Satterthwaite, where they've renamed Hagley Oval the Satterthwaite Oval. So not only will that give everyone the chance to finally pronounce her name correctly as we get to the twilight of her career, but a pretty nice tribute for her. And that was probably the most exciting thing about the women's game that I noticed.
Great stuff. Well, we're desperately in need of some positivity, so here we are, boys. India absolutely spanking the Australians. Good times. I was reading the comments, of course, of the great Alan Border, who was just livid at the fact that the Australian players were giving the thumbs up to the Indian bowlers when they beat them outside the off-stump, namely and particularly Steve Smith. But absolute pantsing for Australia there.
And the Nagpur pitch was difficult, but it wasn't the horror that people thought it was going to be.
Yeah, yes.
That whole Steve Smith thing is a little bit over-egged in terms that he's a quirky, idiosyncratic guy at the best of times, isn't he? So him giving the thumbs up to Jadeja when he beat him outside off stump was pretty on brand, I thought. And
yes.
If you're going to knock a guy that averages 60, I don't think he should be first on AB's list anyway, put it that way. But it was really bizarre. I think Australia tangled themselves in knots before this test with all these ideas about left-handers and right-handers and who's going to succeed over there. They've got his name escapes me. Great, one of the few nice Australians, Travis Head, in red-hot form.
Yes.
Can't get in the 11. They got Renshaw, who's not in great form, gets in the 11 because of his perceived strength against spin, gets first ball duck and 2. So, nothing really went right for them, but I have enjoyed the reaction to that drubbing. The Australians love eating their own.
Oh, yeah, they do. And it's a joy to watch, isn't it, Paul Ford? An absolute joy to watch.
Oh, It is. It felt ironic that it was called the Nightmare of Nagpur because it felt incredibly joyful watching it. How good is Ashwin? I mean, you're bowling Australia out for 91 and they're missing deliveries, just getting clean bowled. It is. It's quite remarkable. And Dylan, you were talking about the pitch, and Gideon Haigh wrote this beautiful thing where he said, well, first of all, he said that Australia stuffed up on the first day when they won the toss, and they actually looked like they could put on a decent total, and they got, they sort of probably, as you say, maybe overthought themselves out. But anyway, he wrote that if the pitch was destined to break up as the Australians suspected, we will now never know because the match did not last long enough. Were this a murder, we would be silently congratulating the killer on disposing of the body. And I guess that's the thing when a test match only goes for 3 days, you're sort of left wondering what might have been. And that very niggly piece of cricket administration, which meant that the Australians were quite keen to go out and have a net on the fourth day, and the Indians very conveniently watered and got the heavy roller out and just sort of fixed the pitch for them to get out there and do that. There's some great cricket geopolitics going on. And of course, the one of the test matches that's coming up, they've changed the venue because the grass hasn't grown. It's like extraordinary that you would do this, because if the grass hasn't grown today, it probably wasn't ready a month ago, and it probably wasn't ready 3 months ago. So, amazing that they can move a test from Dharamshala to indoor because of concerns about the surface during the test series.
They have
pretty amazing. And
they have
I was just going to say, and Ashwin has 18 wickets at 12 at indoor. So look out.
They've got something like 29 international venues, 23 of which are active test venues or something like that. It's extraordinary what they can do in that country.
Yeah, it's amazing stuff. Well, speaking of Test cricket, the West Indies beat Zimbabwe by an innings thanks to Chandapal and Moti.
Chandapal, which one?
Pardon?
Shivnarine Chandapal.
No, not him, the other guy, the other fella. How do you say his name again, Paul? Because I always go Tangerine.
Yeah, which is almost, well, it's sloppy from a professional broadcaster such as yourself. Tagenarine. And,
Tagenarine.
Just because it looks like tangerine, and I'm sure Dylan wouldn't have written it incorrectly to make you embarrass yourself.
Yes, I know.
There's just no way that would happen.
No, I know. But you've got to explain to us the complex geopolitical dynamics of Caribbean cricket and why these two Indo-Guyanese have been marginalised, perhaps calling upon the poetry of Shana Yardin to illustrate the complex post-colonial issues, apparently, Paul Ford.
Am I? Well, as Shana Yardin would say, how can you walk into the garden of my life and trample on the neatly laid out beds of habit, or pluck the buds from struggling trees of thoughts grown dearer than human companionship and plant within its centre the image of yourself? I mean, that's what she'd say. But I guess there is this interesting part here where Guyana is, well, the West Indies is a dog's breakfast, let's be honest, because it's not actually a country, it's a collection of countries. And it does feel like we are witnessing the start of what might be the great unravelling in that part of the world. So Guyana, just very quickly, is actually part of South America, and you've got this weird divide between, I guess, the Caribbean African descendants of some of the islands, and then in Guyana you have lots of indentured Indian slaves. So you have that kind of Indian historical backdrop, and there's always been a bit of a divide between those countries. And whether it's real or perceived, I don't know, but certainly some complex geopolitical stuff in the background here. Is that the sort of stuff you wanted to get into?
Yeah, that's perfect, mate. And I guess the motivation for you running so succinctly through the geopolitical dynamics of the Caribbean is the fact that, Moti, who was the best bowler in the series, and Chandapal, who was the best batsman, are 26 and 27, so they're not super young, and they've played 7 tests between them. Like, the West Indies have been dog poop for years now. It's not like they can afford to keep good players out of their test team.
Yeah, that's true. Hey, let's move on now to Paul Ford's News or Ruse with Hoyte in the lead.
I think you might be in the lead, but I'm pretty sure I'm the current holder of the Oi Hoi Challenge trophy, cricket's most ugly trophy. If anyone cares to Google it, it is a shocker, and it looks terrible on your mantelpiece. But I've got it, and you guys haven't. Anyway, 3 things. There'll be something wrong with one of them. Number 1, I spotted a cool thing happening over the ditch as former Queensland fast bowler and policeman Luke Feldman joined the Queensland Bulls Masters for a fundraiser to help the families of the police officers shot in rural Queensland last December. The Bulls Masters is a charitable organisation headed up by Queensland cricket legends Jimmy Mayer and Michael Kasprowitz, who is a Shehad fan, I can confirm, because I asked him on the boundary once. This week they are in Chinchilla for cricket coaching clinics, visits to local hospitals and schools, and will play a T20 cricket match with all proceeds going to the Chinchilla Cricket Club and the Police Remembrance Fund for the families of the victims. The match is expected to attract 4,000 people out in the Wops. Feldman has been an officer in the Queensland Police for 18 years, before, during and after his cricket career. He now works in Brisbane with the Missing Persons Unit. Bloody good on them. Number 2, Bandham Ram Vastraka, the father of Indian women's cricketer Pooja Vastraka, said he wanted her to put away the money she earned in the IPL auction in a fixed deposit account rather than carelessly spending it. Papa Vastraka was not happy when his youngest daughter Pooja bought him a $29,000 car before the auction and before she headed off to South Africa for the T20 World Cup. He called it a waste of money. Then on Monday, his 23-year-old daughter was picked up by Mumbai for $362,000, and that's New Zealand dollars, in the inaugural WPL auction. The 72-year-old was in the media again, berating his daughter with sage financial advice, encouraging her to put all the money into a fixed deposit rather than splurge it. He told the Indian Express, "She does waste a lot of money." A retired international cricketer and bank employee, Mr. Vastraka, said Pooja is the youngest among 7 siblings and has always been his favourite. Another absolutely controversial media comment to throw into a news story. She was very famous in the local tennis ball cricket scene for hitting sixes off boys bowling at her who would double her size. She's a bit of a legend, old Pooja, so keep an eye out for her. And number 3, there are some significant allegations and revelations being aired after BCCI Chief Selector Chetan Sharma fell victim to a TV sting operation that will, quote, leave millions of fans baffled, angry and shocked in a country where cricketers are worshipped like God and madness for the sport knows no limits, end quote. Sharma was captured on Z Media's spy camera, during which he claimed that many players in Indian cricket take injections to get fit, even when they are unfit, and said it was basically impossible to overrule his decisions as chief selector. His comments have raised several questions about the impartiality of the BCCI team selection process and why some players still get favoured despite poor fitness levels, yet others are dropped because of despite having good fitness levels. He was also heard saying that nearly 80 to 85 players are unfit during selection time, and that some players take injections to fake fitness and have their own doctor of cricket who are available to provide them with shots so they can be deemed fit ahead of crucial tournaments. Could be a bit of chaos that ensues off the back of that, and I'd suggest he may not be the chief of selectors in, 2 days' time? Let's see. Anyway, there we go. There's the 3 things, boys.
Hey, you're first, I think.
No, I was first last week.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Going to rule out the first one, obviously, because the tragedy etiquette. So that's either, is it the Tesla? I saw a little bit of footage of that. Yeah, I'm going to go for that one. I'm going to say that it wasn't 29,000. She wasn't picked up for that price.
Yep. Damn it, that's what I was going to say.
She was picked up for something slightly more.
Yeah. What do I do in that scenario? I was going to say that wasn't her price. She was actually bought for more than that.
I'm happy with that. I think you both have to come up with your reasons, and one can win if they get the right reason, and you can take the belt off me. But you both collectively share the belt because, yeah, you're right. It was number 2, but it was a cricket-related thing. Bandham Ram Vastraka is not a retired international cricketer, nor was he a bank employee. He worked for a telecommunications company. So there you go. I did try and keep it cricket-related after some of that feedback.
One apiece, then, Em. One apiece. Waiting! All right, it's time now for Dylan Cleaver's Obscure Players of the 90s.
Obscure Players of the 90s.
Jeebus, I've got a beauty, so I hope we've got a bit of time today. We've moved up to the nation's capital, Wellington, and my obscure cricketer of the 90s is a right-arm shoulder bowler called Greg McKenzie. And I asked a couple of my favourite Wellingtonians, Tim Boyer and Stephen Mather, if they could furnish any information, and I've got screeds of texts. So Greg McKenzie was a little bit of a character. He gave himself the nickname of Fat Macca, Fat spelled P-H-A-T. He played 17 first-class games. He was actually born in Brisbane, went to Havelock North High, then ended up in Wellington. 17 first-class games for Wellington. He batted 20 innings and accumulated 53 runs at an average of 3.53. To give some reference point here, Chris Martin, the one and only Chris Martin, had a first-class batting average of 3.71. So technically he was a worse batter than Chris Martin.
That's saying something.
But he was a very good bowler. 45 wickets at 32.64 and 2 5-wicket bags. And apparently one of the funniest people ever to play cricket. He was known to refuse to field on the fine leg boundary because the bowler shouldn't have been bowling it down leg anyway. In one match, he was taking guard against Auckland, and the umpire said, "Bowler is," and before he could get it out, he said, "It's all right, I've seen him on TV, I know what he does." It was Deepak Patel. He was a Mara St Pat's stalwart, and they ended up merging, I believe, with Kilburnie to form East. And his departure from that club kicked off the most successful club dynasty in New Zealand club history. He also bowled in custom-made false teeth in attempts to distract the batter. He once got Stephen Mather out in a club match, and Mather hit the ball straight to cover and was caught. And Mather stood there in disbelief because he was so disappointed with himself going out in such a soft matter. So Fat Macca said, "Math, you're still here. Perhaps you're not clearer on the rules of cricket. The bowler bowls the ball, the batter tries to hit it, and if the batter hits it in the air and the fielder catches it, then the batter is out. So I bowled it, you hit it, he caught it, so that's out. Now F off." Except he didn't use F, obviously. He also was known to run an excellent meat pack raffle at the club. He always sold out all the tickets to the opposition, yet one of the East team players would always win it. There was no meat pack, apparently. It was discovered later. Very good quiz master. The East Premierships happened to win 4 consecutive cricket club quiz nights with Macca as the MP and quiz master, and reliably provided the team with the answers beforehand. He was a big believer that sixes should be awarded not just on length but on height. So the higher the six, you should get more runs for it. So he believed you should get a 9 for a very high 6. And he is also, one of his claims to fame is taking the longest time to bowl a hat-trick ball, because on the second wicket he accidentally shat himself. He had to remove himself from the field, clean himself up before coming on to bowl the hat-trick ball against Canterbury. I don't believe it was successful. He once played Sri Lanka and dismissed Sanath Jayasuriya at the Basin, and as he dismissed him, he says in a Richie Beno voice, "He's got him, he's gone. McKenzie knocks over Jayasuriya," as he's running down the wicket.
Great stuff.
So a bit of a legend of the Wellington club scene, and sounds like he'd be a perfect to get on the BYC for
a bit of a chit-chat.
And the Quickfire 11.
I think he lives just around the corner. I think he's a mortgage broker here in Karori. So, he sounds like a very obvious contender. Fat Macca. What an absolute legend he sounds.
Right now it's time for Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
Yes, we're in the metropolitan borough of Bury, Greater Manchester today, 3.3 miles north of the Manchester city centre. A group of men were attacked by a gang wielding a cricket bat and a bladed article during a robbery in Prestwich. Police were called to Pendlebury Close in the early hours of Saturday. It was reported a group of men sat inside a parked vehicle and were approached by another group at around midnight. The group inside the parked car were assaulted and a robbery took place. Officers attending the scene recovered canisters of nitrous oxide nearby on the NOS. 3 men, 2 aged 18, 1 aged 17, were arrested on suspicion of possession with intent to supply. Witnesses who reported the incident believed weapons, including a cricket bat and a bladed article, were involved. This was a violent robbery, the police said, that will understandably cause concern in our local community. It's good that those offenders have been brought to justice, and Manchester is going to be safer for it.
Great stuff, Paul Ford. Now we've got something from the commentary nook.
Looking forward to this.
A bit of a chit-chat on the field between the great late Shane Warne, Glenn McGrath and Tubby Taylor. And just listen carefully because I'm going to ask a question at the end of this commentary.
Hey, Warnie.
Yeah.
Warnie, it's Tubbs here again, mate.
Yes,
is he
Tubbs.
actually swinging it? And if he is,
I think there are a little
what's
bit.
brought that on? Retirement?
What's that?
Is he actually swinging it back into the left-hander? Because it certainly didn't do it much in his career.
I think when he doesn't bowl for a while, he's just the old cage, wily old fox. He just knows what he's doing here. It's nice to watch him swing a couple, as you said. We were standing in the slips to him. We could never get him to bowl an outswinger.
I never tried to swing it during my career.
Didn't need to, mate.
Hopefully this is going to deck across and catch to Warnie, be nice.
Oh, okay. Gilly, dive in front. Practice on the wind machine.
How good is that?
Very good, Vince. Very good.
Well, that's either outstanding bowling or very good luck. He's nominated that. Looking for the little...
Yeah, well, there you go. The great Glenn McGrath. He was hooping it around in that particular match. My question to the listeners out there, who was the batsman he dismissed on that occasion?
Oh, any clues?
No,
Who were they playing?
not telling you.
Oh, jeepers, that's tough.
But I tell you what, the first right answer to Paul Ford in our communications, we'll send out some bling to you. We'll find some ACC paraphernalia as an award. Now, listen, your correspondence, which we love, people want to get in touch with us, Paul Ford, what do they do?
Flick us an email to byc@beigebrigade.co.nz or slide into the DMs on Facebook or the Gram for the Alternative Commentary Collective or the Beige Brigade.
Toppa Correspondence of the Week, brought to you by Leader NZ's Lasagna Topper.
Great stuff, mate. Now, Muzz says to us, Dylan, your love of Canterbury comes through on a regular basis. Who would make your list of the Cantab players you have enjoyed the least?
Well, just so happens that I've made an A to Z.
Oh, my God.
Of course he did.
And look, I just want to let our good listeners from the Canterbury region know this is tongue-in-cheek. I barely know any of these people here at all. But my A to Z is Gren Alabaster, Cran Bull, Dave Crow, father of Martin and Jeff, Dave Dempsey, Andrew Ellis, Rod Fulton, uncle of Pete, Lee Jamon, former All Black coach Graham Henry, Brian Isherwood, Kyle Jamieson, Peter Kennedy, Ben Lachlan, Australian, Neil Maxwell, detestable Australian, Rob Nichol, transplanted Aucklander, Michael Owens, actually he's a really nice fellow, that's not fair having him there, Matt Poore, John Quinn, Peter Rattray, Peter Sharp, Craig Teal, Paul Unwin, Theo Van Works from Home, Anthony Wilding, Wimbledon champion, and Ben Yock, Union Buster.
Is there anyone else that you haven't added there? I mean, it just feels like the Canterbury players of the last 50 years that you've put on, basically.
I couldn't find an X, and I was going to put Chris Zinzan Harris for my Z, but Harry's too nice a bloke. In fact, many of those are too nice a blokes to be on that list.
Well, no, it's out there now, Dylan. You can't backtrack on it, mate. You put
I
it
think
out.
we can edit that up to make it sound way worse.
Yeah, in the public domain. Now, how's the bounce going, by the way?
The bounce is going fantastically. Dylan Cleaver, all one word, .substack.com. Join up, it's free.
Great stuff. And just a reminder, by the way, of course, with the test match starting tomorrow, ACC coverage of that starting tomorrow night as well.
Yes, and I believe I might be doing a couple of little special miniature length pods.
Great stuff, mate. Well, hopefully for the next podcast next week, we'll be reporting on good news.
I'm sure he will be.
Yeah, come on, go Kiwi, I say. Thanks for taking the time to listen to the podcast. We'll be back same time, same place next week. Till then, see you later.